Skyrim, the 10th game in the Elder Scrolls series, the 5th main titled game. Recently, I've been rewriting the entire story in What If Skyrim Was Good? No, I mean really good. For those of you who have not seen this series before, please check the link in the video description and go back to episode 1 so that this entire thing will make a lot more sense. Don't be like this guy. Today we're going to be talking about some of the side quests in Skyrim. Now, I've already retold the main quest of Skyrim. I've already talked about Dawnguard, Dragonborn, and the Civil War. Let's go and talk about some of the side quests. The first set of side quests I'm going to be talking about is the Thalmor Faction. For those of you who saw the first episode, yes indeed, you will be allowed to join the Thalmor under certain circumstances. Not all players will be allowed to join the Thalmor based on their choices during the game. However, as a Thalmor agent, you will be able to do things in order to more or less destabilize the situation. As a member of the Thalmor, your goal is to hunt down secret enclaves of Talos worshippers. Yes, indeed, there is a group known as the Cult of Talos you dealt with in Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. What if I told you that it wasn't extinguished in Morrowind, and indeed there were other cults of Talos all around the Empire, including in Skyrim, and that is the real reason the Thalmor Justiciars are moving around the Empire, is to eliminate the Cult of Talos. Yes, indeed. The Nords know him as Ysmir, so Ysmir worship enclaves in the hills and valleys, in caves, but the Thalmor aren't just roaming around killing Talos worshippers. No, they've got an agenda. You see, they want you to join one of the cults of Talos. They want you to earn their trust, and they want to get you to the leader so that you can deliver the leader to the Thalmor, so that the Thalmor can interrogate and break this person, send them back, and more or less destroy the entire organization from within. Because it's a cell-based organization, no one except the leader knows where all the other cells are. So this is their grand goal, is to get the leader broken, to gather all the members together, and ultimately to end organized Talos worship. Because even if the Stormcloaks are defeated, these secret enclaves would still be meeting. And ultimately, the goal is an endgame, not immediate just butchering. You would of course have numerous chances to betray the Thalmor, in which case you became their enemy. And yes, if you did become the enemy of the Thalmor, wiping out their embassy would be an option. The Thalmor wouldn't instantly repopulate the embassy so much as a Thalmor ship would arrive and they would begin basing their operations off this ship. If you destroyed the ship, then another ship would come. But that's the easy way to take care of it. You could basically kill everyone in the embassy and the embassy would be dead. Elenwyn wouldn't exist anymore. If you did destroy the Cult of Talos, then the Thalmor would recognize you and actually give you their support. You would be recognized as an agent of the Aldmeri Dominion. This would of course make a lot of the Nords hate you, but that is choices and consequences in a role-playing game. Now, if you did destroy the Thalmor and you legitimately joined the Cult of Talos, then you would actually undergo this rite where you would be able to greatly enhance the power for yourself of all the Talos shrines in Skyrim. Essentially, you would be shown favor by Talos. Ultimately, there's no way to get rid of the Thalmor for good, because they are in cahoots with the Empire, and they will just continue to send ships via Solitude or various other ports that we might add around northern Skyrim. Remember when I said the companions wouldn't be werewolves anymore? This is very important because ultimately, the companions should be their own faction, similar to the Fighters Guild. There is no Fighters Guild in Skyrim, we've already established this. Instead, the companions are kind of like a knighthood, in that sense, where they are the honored warriors of Skyrim. You would have to do some miscellaneous mercenary tasks, go fetch the mead, in order to be seen worthy of even joining their ranks on a small mission. And after you did a few more missions for the companions, eventually you could be inducted into their order. But the idea behind the companions is they should be literal descendants of Ysgramor. If not by blood, then by his teachings, by his fighting style. And in Ysgrimmor's style, they should use an axe and a shield, sometimes a two-handed axe, but mostly they are the barbaric knights. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but when you're in a place like Skyrim, it makes more sense because you've got nobles, you have kings who are referred to as jarls. And the grand protectors of Skyrim would be the companions. When the Oblivion Crisis happened, the companions leapt into action and protected Skyrim's towns from being razed because Oblivion Gates were popping up in Skyrim as well. But because of the might of the companions, Skyrim did not fall. And that is an honorable legacy to try to live up to. But in terms of the witches, in terms of the path with Codlag Whitemane and the wolf spirit and all that stuff, the circle, none of that's true. Instead, we would literally have a coven of friendly witches that you could consult with, and they would be an entirely separate faction from the companions. This coven of witches would provide you with Hersing's curse if you asked them to get stronger. You would have to do a quest for them in order for them to grant you Hersing's boon. However, the most effective way to contract lycanthropy and become a werewolf would be to simply encounter a wild werewolf encounter during your gameplay. Not getting the disease cured within 3 days would result in your transformation into a werewolf. As per Daggerfall and Morrowind's werewolf forms, you would need to feed at least once a week or you would get weaker. And unlike Daggerfall, it wouldn't have to be an innocent person. There's plenty of bandits for you to eat. After becoming a werewolf, the witches should have several more quests leading up to you being able to get Savior's Hide. There should not be a place where you have to choose between Hersing's Ring and the Armor of Savior's Hide, but rather they are from separate quests. And the idea is that if you want to maximize your power as a werewolf, you'd go for Hersing's Totem, you'd go for the ring, and you'd go for the Armor of the Savior's Hide, and you would equip them all individually. And wearing the Armor of the Savior's Hide would actually have a unique mesh that would be worn on your character in werewolf form. The idea is that with all 3 artifacts, you are basically the champion of Hersing. Now, before you actually get involved in the Civil War, you should be allowed to travel in and out of both Solitude and Windhelm as you see fit. When you visit Windhelm, specifically the Dunmer district, you should be able to do various quests for the Dunmer, one of which you should be able to uncover Ulfric's true lineage. If you read the book The Real Baranziah, there is a piece of lore where Tiber Septim and Baranziah actually conceived a child, but Tiber Septim made her have an abortion. We're going to discover through forgotten records that Ulfric's lineage actually comes from Baranziah, that he actually has dark elf blood in his veins. Baranziah and Tiber Septim's son, who was supposedly aborted but not really, Baranziah had the child and then gave the child to a Nordic family. The son eventually grew up, met a Nord, fell in love, and this Nord bore a septum-blooded Nord. So essentially, yes, Ulfric is a descendant of Tiber Septim, however it's crossing multiple racial lines, and he definitely has Dunmer ancestry. This is a secret they're trying to hide, and ultimately could destabilize things for Ulfric. But if confronted with this truth, Ulfric would deny it, and his followers would deny it as well. It wouldn't have a serious impact on the Civil War. However, it would be a piece of Ulfric's background that would go to explaining why perhaps he had a bias toward the Dunmer that other Nords did not share. Why he was so accepting of them in the first place. If you tried to present this information to, say, General Tullius, he would basically say, keep it secret, don't tell anyone about this, because we want to distance Ulfric from the throne, not give him a blood connection. We want to entirely refute the idea that he is connected to Tiber Septim in any way. And General Tullius is afraid that if this information came to light, that it would give members of the Elder Council pause in the Civil War. And that is the last thing General Tullius wants, is to have this war drawn out or even cancelled, because it would cause more problems for both the Empire and Skyrim in the long run. Ultimately, as I said earlier, nothing should come of this side plot. It should just be an interesting side plot in order to learn some lore. Confirming that Ulfric is in fact of dragon blood, making his claim that he is the Dragonborn all the more convincing. but ultimately that revelation should be the accumulation of everything you've learned in the Dunmer district doing side quests for them. Remember when I told you before that the Thieves Guild was in this labyrinth underneath Riften? Well, it should be fairly close to the entrance of the labyrinth, because deep, deep down, there should basically be a testament to Yeager Tharn's legacy. This should have been one of his research facilities where he worked on stuff like the Staff of Chaos and things like that. Ultimately, this labyrinth should tie into the Mages Guild questline. And you really only have to go through the labyrinth once because you'll get the graveyard exit afterward. So there'll be no reason for you to go through that labyrinth anymore. However, if you do decide to delve deep, deep into the labyrinth, you're going to find out that it was actually a secret research facility for Yeager Tharn. Remember when he was basically turning Daedra into humans? He was making them look like Imperials? Well, we're going to have a bunch of tubes and stuff like that filled with liquid, having, Daedroths and other creatures that, are malformed, maybe looking somewhat human. This is going to be a secret underground research facility. He hid it in Skyrim because it's the back-ass land of back-asslands. No one would think to look there. See, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Staff of Magnus out of Labyrinthian. Labyrinthian had the piece of the Staff of Chaos that Yeager Tharn hid. Do you think he'd just leave the Staff of Magnus in there? Hell no. You see, instead, you're going to have to fight Yeager Tharn's twisted minions that had been guarding this facility for so long in order to get your hands on the staff. That means going down an actual labyrinth, not just the single path that Labyrinthian had for you. I'm going to go ahead and show you a map of Labyrinthian as it was, and then you can compare that to Skyrim. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this classic style labyrinth as the labyrinth below Riften. And it's going to lead to Yeager Tharn's facility, where you're going to be able to get the Staff of Magnus. You could say he was researching the staff. I mean, Yeager Tharn was a power-hungry bastard. Maybe he was looking for the Eye of Magnus in the first place. There are all kinds of possibilities. Now let's go back to the Dark Brotherhood questline real quick. The Emperor knew you were coming to assassinate him. That's fine. The Emperor decided he was going to let you kill him. That's fine. But you should be able to do a couple things. Number one, you should be able to tell him that you are actually Dragonborn. That you are the true successor to the Empire. Maybe the Emperor would have a laugh at it. At that concept that, he was sitting on the Ruby Throne, which has always been for a Dragonborn. And, his family managed to get 2 generations out of it. That's pretty impressive, right? Instead of the Emperor just monologuing at you, you should have the opportunity to say a couple things and elicit responses. And ultimately, it should feel like a conversation with a character that has been fleshed out, not just a node to say, well, kill me and finish your quest, get it done with. No, that's not how it works. Now, ultimately, I would like to see an option to not kill the Emperor, to basically betray the Night Mother and Sithis and everybody, and let the Emperor live. Obviously, the wrath of Sithis would come for you then, and you'd be kicked out of the Dark Brotherhood. Even if you were the listener, you made the conscious decision to go against the Night Mother's will, so you would have to repent for that. In classic Oblivion form, whenever you betray the Dark Brotherhood, you have to then repent, and the Wrath of Sithis comes to hunt you down. You beat the Wrath of Sithis, and then you can return to the fold, knowing that you failed to kill the Emperor. But the Emperor should not remain in place forever. If you decide not to kill him, that's it. Now then, let's talk about the Blades, because this is a part that we've had coming for some time. The Blades should be more dedicated to you as the Dragonborn, the ultimate Dragon Slayer, the last of the Dragon Blood, the last true Dragon Blood Dragonborn. They're looking to you. You are the reason why the Akaviri Dragon Guard came to Tamriel in the first place. And so as you do different quests, killing dragons, hunting down dragon priest masks to secure their powers for yourself, gathering Akaviri relics that may have been scattered in Skyrim, eventually it comes down to, if you haven't finished the Civil War yet, they're ready to assassinate the leaders of both factions. General Tullius, Jarl Elisif, Ulfric Stormcloak, all these forces have to die, and the Blades are going to help you do it. They want you to secure your place dominant over Skyrim. Now, ultimately, if for any reason you've conquered the Civil War on either side, then they'll want to take out the dominant side and leave room for your ascendance. And in fact, there'll be several plots in amongst the Blades, because remember, the Blades are spy masters. They're Dragon Slayer's second. They've always been spy masters. Look at how sneaky Delphine was, for goodness sakes. If you follow the Blades' quest to their conclusion, ultimately people will be assassinated, and eventually you will end up ascending as the High King of Skyrim. Anyone who would have opposed you in the moot gets made moot. This will be made a lot easier if you were declared Jarl of Windhelm, but if you were not declared Jarl of Windhelm, you'd have to go through a whole completely different quest line in order to secure a different hold. Eventually, however, with Jarl Elisif's death and General Tullius's death, you should be able to secure your place as High King, giving you Jarl Elisif's quarters in the Blue Palace, because the Blue Palace is traditionally the home of the High King. Now, when you consult with the Blades after becoming High King, you'll have the opportunity to bring them into the Blue Palace, basically get them out of hiding, and put them as your personal bodyguards. We'll spruce up that Pelagius wing, and we'll make that the new Blades' home base. But ultimately, how the Nords view you as a ruler should be dependent on what you did and how you got to where you were. So if you did the Civil War to its conclusion and then took over Windhelm, you're already an established Jarl. You did the right thing. You beat Ulfric Stormcloak in fair combat, so it makes sense that you would eventually ascend. However, if you didn't defeat Ulfric in fair combat and things were done kind of shady-like, well, in that case, we really don't know how some of the Nords are going to view it. They might send assassins after you. There might be all kinds of crazy stuff going on. But this is where your choices are supposed to matter. Now, once you are all set up as High King of Skyrim, now at which point you'll be able to ask the Blades how the plan goes to secure the rest of Tamriel. They will just tell you they're working on it and they have an idea, but it's going to take some time. And so that's pretty much where the Blades quest line ends, because we can't have you leaving Skyrim to attack the rest of Tamriel. Ultimately, the game Skyrim is limited to Skyrim, so they just need more time. And canonically, they will need more time for as long as you are playing Skyrim. The next side quest I want to talk more about is the Thieves Guild. Under no circumstances should Brynjolf just come up to you and say, "I need help with a money-making scheme." Instead, you should have to seek him out. You should have to ask about the Thieves Guild. Perhaps Vex or Sapphire might know something about it, but you would have to seek Brynjolf out on your own initiative. Just walking around Riften, you would never know a Thieves Guild even existed, other than you getting pickpocketed by chance. And that's the way a good Thieves Guild operates, is you never know it's even there. Ultimately, you would be contracted as a third-party thief in order to break into Golden Glow Estate, and if you get the job done, then they'd lead you through the maze underneath Riften. Remember, there is a labyrinth underneath Riften. This is important. And they would basically unlock the Ragged Flagon for you. The Ragged Flagon is not somewhere that anyone can just get into on their own. It actually takes quite a bit of effort. Now, I have no problem with Carlia or Mercer's betrayal of the guild. My problem is that you have to become a Nightingale in order to defeat Mercer. You should be able to refuse becoming a Nightingale. Period. There should be no requirement for you to pledge your soul to Nocturnal. That is a huge role-playing choice and should impact any other role-playing you have with different Daedra. You cannot pledge your soul to every single Daedra in the world. You can do tasks for them, but you don't truly become their champion. Now, if you do choose to return with Carlia in order to perform the ritual in becoming a Nightingale, the ritual should have significance. Nocturnal granted you the power of the Nightingale, and then only to have Carlia turn around and tell you, oops, because Mercer has the key, you can't actually be a Nightingale. Those gifts were stolen from us. Either Nocturnal grants you power, or she doesn't. We're not going to hold off and have Nocturnal suddenly grant you a power at the end of the storyline. The idea is if you make the role-playing choice to make yourself a Nightingale, that alters you to where you cannot become the champion of other Daedra. But in exchange for that, you get all three of those powers. All three of the normal powers that you would have gotten, you are to employ those in order to catch up with and defeat Mercer. Having the key should have access to some nifty powers as well, perhaps even the same powers that you have. Now, after defeating Mercer in what should be a difficult boss fight, you should be able to take the initiative and keep the key, in which case Brynjolf and Carlia would both lose their powers because, you all betrayed Nocturnal's purpose, and they would get pissed at you. Carlia would get enraged, you would have to kill her. Brynjolf, we don't know exactly what would happen with him. You could convince him to stay and work with the guild for a speech check, but if you fail that speech check, you would have to fight and kill Brynjolf as well, declaring yourself the sole leader of the Thieves Guild, and you could just reveal to the whole guild that they had pledged themselves to Nocturnal, and you could actually lie to the guild members and say that Brynjolf and Carlia attempted to sacrifice everyone to Nocturnal, how they were stealing the luck of all the members and whatnot, and how you're going to get the guild back on track, putting yourself in the de facto guildmaster position. No honor among thieves. Alternatively, if you didn't become the Nightingale, you could have Carlia return the skeleton key, and she would never be seen again. She would simply take the skeleton key into the final dungeon. You wouldn't get any Nightingale powers, you wouldn't get any rewards, but just, you'd literally tell Brynjolf that, hey, this wasn't for us. Swearing ourselves to a Daedric prince, we're not going to do it. This is her mission. And so you could send her off and she'd never be seen again. And you'd go on to become the leader of the Thieves Guild. I don't have a problem with you becoming the leader of the Thieves Guild. However, ultimately, players' freedom to choose different things needs to be respected, but at the same time, the consequences of the player making certain actions needs to be respected. With or without Carlia, with or without Brynjolf, it is possible to succeed the leadership of the Thieves Guild. It's just the circumstances would be different, and you may or may not have the skeleton key with you. Now, next we're going to talk about the Molag Bal Quest. The Molag Bal Quest was especially distressing for me, considering you should just be able to walk out that door and say, fuck you. But at no point in time does the game allow you the freedom of choice. You're simply told, go do this thing for me, and your only option is to, after the dialogue is done, ignore it, or to see the quest through to its completion. Ultimately, what I would like the ability to do is to go find that priest, tell that priest, Molag Bal attempted to get me to do this, but I want to turn the tide on him. I want to support Boethia instead. And so you could get this priest to not only befane his altar, but basically channel Boethia's power to make the altar vulnerable, and then use Molag Bal's own mace to crush the altar. It would remain the rusted mace. It would never attain its full power as the mace of Molag Bal, but you could have it as a trophy, like, yeah, this was Molag Bal's mace, this rusted piece of crap. And, I rejected Molag Bal, so it was never infused with its true power. But it's a good trophy, saying that I kicked a Daedric prince's ass, even if it was just his altar. Another part of the quest I would like to see is at the beginning where the Vigilant of Stendarr, you're basically forced to kill him. I would have, again, liked to be able to leave the house with the Vigilant of Stendarr, just with a speech check, convince him, we can get out of this. And so he won't attack you or anything. He will actually help you break out. You should be able to convince him to go get a bunch more Vigilance of Stendarr, go back in and perform this cleansing ritual on the altar to destroy it again. So that's two ways to destroy the altar, or the option to actually do what Molag Bal wants you to do. But that House of Horrors, I'd say when you went back in to destroy it, that the house would have completely changed. It would have looked like Cold Harbor almost. And it would have had like extremely long halls. It should have extremely long hallways. We're talking about like Apocrypha kind of stretching hallways, except in the Cold Harbor style. This frozen over reflection of the Imperial City, basically. I'm not talking about the ESO style Cold Harbor, that can go fuck off. So after fighting all these Cold Harbor Daedra, which are basically just regular Daedra with kind of like blue markings on them and stuff like that, you know, showing them that they're Molag Bal's version. You know, not much development work required for that. You'd get to the altar and you would destroy it, and the moment you destroyed it, it would transport you back to the regular version of the house. Think about it like a little pocket realm. Molag Bal isn't actually there, but he was reaching out into Mundus through this pocket realm, which explains how he had power over the house in the first place. Because the moment you stepped into that house, you were kind of halfway into Cold Harbor, halfway into Mundus. It was a kind of bending of the realms. Either way, that's complete. There are many, many more side quests I want to talk about, but I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to go with the biggest one that I want to talk about, and that is the Mehrunes Dagon quest. I still want to have Silas doing his museum, except what he's doing is he's hiring bodyguards. I still want to have Silas doing his museum, however, it should be in some really big place on the edge of Dawnstar. Keeping in mind that, again, our version of Dawnstar is a very imperialized port town, as it was in Elder Scrolls Travels Dawnstar, the game. Instead of having a Jarl, it has a regional governor who also acts as the Jarl. Anyway, he's trying to maintain neutrality, kind of like Balgruuf, while actually supporting the Stormcloaks, because he's in a tenuous position. He's within striking range of Imperial warships. That's a big deal, okay? So he has to be like, yes, I'm totally on the side of the Empire. Totally. All right, let's get some supplies to Ulfric right now. That's the kind of relationship that they should have in Dawnstar. So it should be a fairly upscale, highly built place. As a result, the museum should be a couple floors. You know, it's not just a little crap shack house. It should be a very large stone building. And inside should be a testament to the glories of the Mythic Dawn, including, you know, like Dremora helmets, spikes from Oblivion, you know, planters with creep clusters, and those whip vines. There should be a pit with those undying flesh packs, you know, those flesh packs in Oblivion that never decay, called the Punished. The point is, the inside of his museum should look normal on the first floor, and then the second floor should look almost like the inside of an Oblivion gate, because it's been so well crafted and tailored. Like, this is a labor of love by this guy who absolutely just can't let go of the fact that his family was part of this. And so he gathered up all the forbidden materials, all the stuff they had thrown away and buried. He squandered his family fortune in order to have these people excavate this stuff and bring it to him. And this is a problem for several reasons. Number one, there are Nords who want this place burnt down. He's hired bodyguards so far, but he doesn't feel like the security is quite up to snuff. He's not looking for you to rebuild the Razor. He's looking for you to secure the place, to protect it. Also, this has caught the eye of the Vigilance of Stendarr, specifically the ones at Stendarr's Beacon. Over on the east side of Skyrim, near Riften, the Vigilance of Stendarr's Beacon. Cavort with any Daedra and you'll have to deal with me. So you can approach this quest one of two ways. You can either be recruited by Silas to protect the museum, or you can be recruited by the Vigilance of Stendarr to infiltrate the museum and find out what's going on. Your first quest for Silas, once you're picked up, whether you are an agent of the Vigilance or not, will be to protect the museum overnight. Turns out some thieves come in. They are not members of the Thieves Guild. They're independent thievery, as it were, and you kill them. Simply put, Silas then trusts you and will set you upon the task of gathering the shards of Mehrunes' Razor. Once you've finished gathering the shards of Mehrunes' Razor, he will explain his family's history. He'll take you on the tour and everything, and he'll ask you to help him put the Razor back together. Now, Silas is going to take you underneath the museum. He's going to show you a book in his private vault, which is the Mysterium Xerxes. It's unable to be entirely destroyed, but pages can be removed, and a single page is missing. The key that Silas needs to open up a portal with which to retrieve the essence of the Razor. You see, the reason the Razor was able to be broken in the first place is because its divine essence, its power, was removed from it. And that power rests within the remnants of another plane of oblivion. He plans to free that power, to imbue the Razor with that power again, to restore it, so that he may take his place as the champion of Mehrunes Dagon, and bring Mehrunes Dagon's glory to Tamriel. It's at this point the quest will diverge. Now, if you were an agent of the Vigilance of Stendarr's Beacon, you can return to them and say, this guy's trying to restore Mehrunes' Razor, a Daedric artifact. He's planning to become Mehrunes' champion. They're like, holy shit, and they send in their full forces from Stendarr's Beacon to destroy the museum. Alternatively, you can go with Silas on this mission to find the last of this particular order that was responsible for destroying the Razor. Silas will brutally kill this guy, and you will find the last page of the Mysterium Xerxes. You can see all these tools where he tried to crumple up the page, he tried to burn it, he tried to do all these things, but ultimately the book itself is indestructible. Aside from removing the pages, he wasn't able to destroy them. It turns out he had scattered the pages in several places in Tamriel. Silas's agents had gotten all the pages except for this last one. Once he gets that last page, he flips out, realizing that in order to open up this portal, in order to get what he needs the blood of a divine. And he doesn't know anywhere he could get his hands on that. You'll have an option to tell him, however, that you're Dragonborn, would your blood work? And he'll sit there dumbfounded for a second and go, yes, yes. He'll be ecstatic. And so you'll take the book with you, along with the shards and everything, specifically to Mehrunes Dagon Shrine. There you'll use one of the shards to cut your hand and perform this ritual. The required Daedric relic to make this work will actually be the shards of the Razor, so you won't need to sacrifice another Daedric relic to make this work. So when he performs this ritual, and he opens up this portal, a hand should come through the portal, pick up Silas, just like literally lift Silas into the air, strangling him, and then Mankar Camoran should step out. Except he should be flickering. He should look like Mankar Camoran in the flesh. Every once in a while, his body should distort, and it should look translucent like a wraith or a ghost. And then it should go back to being flesh and then ghost, and it should just every once in a while flicker between those two states. Silas, even though he's being held by the throat, should still be able to gasp and say, "You're still alive." He should have some really smart-ass thing to say. "No, not really. You see, I was killed, not by a Dragonborn, but by a filthy swine no better than yourself." And Silas would ask, "Well then, if you're dead, how are you here?" Mankar Camoran should say, "Here? I've always been here." He should say, "From the moment you performed that ritual," and then it should teleport you into the paradise. "You've both been here, with me." Except the paradise should be kind of merged with Mehrunes Dagon Shrine to where it looks like the inside of the paradise, the way it did when you were playing it in Oblivion, kind of like an Ayleid ruin almost. But then you can also see the altar of Mehrunes Dagon still, and the cliff past the shrine of Mehrunes Dagon. So he should literally just walk over to the edge, and you should have the opportunity to try to kill him, and your attacks will just pass through him. Like, literally, he's just a ghost at this point. So Mankar Camoran should just throw Silas's corpse over the edge, down the cliff. That shouldn't exist in the paradise, but does, because this is, again, an amalgamation of the paradise and the Shrine of Mehrunes Dagon at the same time. It's a conceptual world that you're in. What should happen now is that the shards on the altar should literally evaporate and turn into particles of light. No, those particles should go into Mankar Camoran, and Mankar Camoran should stop flickering. He should become solid at this point. And he should say, You are like me. You are Dragonborn, aren't you?" And he should say something like, "What a farce this is." He should quote his commentaries in a few ways, talking about how he's been to the end of the world and back, he's spoken with the Magna G, he became Dragonborn through his own efforts, he even wore the Amulet of Kings and held the fate of the world in his hands. And he'll explain that now that the shards of the Razor are returned, so too is he whole again, and now he will use the last Dragonborn, you, as a vessel through which he can return to Tamriel. At this point, you will have no other choice. You will have to fight Mankar Camoran. But now that Mankar Camoran's solid, you should be able to fight him. In fact, you'll have to fight him. Upon defeating him, you guys should flash back to Tamriel, specifically at the Mehrunes Dagon shrine. Mankar Camoran should be standing there with you, except he's back to looking like a translucent wraith completely. He isn't flickering between the two states anymore. And you see the razor clatter to the ground at his feet. At which point, Mankar Camoran should go down to try to reach the razor. He should try to grab it. His hand kind of passes through the razor. He should exclaim "no" at the top of his lungs. And Mehrunes Dagon will give his iconic line, "Mehrunes Dagon does not declare a victor while there is still a pawn on the board." Mankar Camoran will flash back to flesh again, and you should have to fight him one more time. Once you kill him, his form should just go inside the razor, and he then tells you, "My razor is yours, mortal. Use it to wreak havoc on the peoples of Tamriel," so on and so forth. Mankar Camoran was Mehrunes' razor. Both may have existed in the past at the same time, but when Mankar Camoran created his paradise and became Mehrunes Dagon's champion, he more or less became an instrument of Mehrunes Dagon. He conceptually became the razor. When his physical form was destroyed, he and the razor became one. And now, you literally wield Mankar Camoran in your hand. There are a lot more side quests to go over. Unfortunately, I'm out of time. I hope you like this piece of subjective fan fiction, because it's never going to happen. And people have constantly asked me, I should be employed by Bethesda. I should be employed by Bethesda. That's not how it works. Bethesda is a brilliant company that succeeds at achieving its design direction every single game it makes. But you have to understand something. The story of the Elder Scrolls exists to support the gameplay. It does not exist to tell a story of its own. That's why the story is disjointed. That's why it is broken. Because ultimately, Bethesda chooses a design direction to follow, to make their game. And then they write the story appropriately, and they rewrite the story if, say, a quest designer decides they want to do something cool with it. Well, that's the way the design direction goes. Daggerfall was about creating a fantasy world. Morrowind was about redefining that fantasy world, making it alien, making sure that it is differentiated and not Tolkien generic. Oblivion was about creating realistic, breathing, living NPCs that interacted with each other and the world itself. Unfortunately, Oblivion's really the only place where their design direction failed. They had to slash a lot of that Radiant AI because it was doing things that eventually made the gaming experience unplayable after about 15 or 20 hours. For example, an NPC would go and buy all the armor in a shop, and then the shops would be empty. Or another NPC would arbitrarily go do this because their Radiant AI told them to do that as part of their daily life. And as a result, a stacking problem occurred. So in that sense, Oblivion was the only place where their design direction failed them. They scaled it back. But ultimately, it was about the NPCs interacting with each other. Finally, Skyrim. The design of Skyrim is to make those NPCs interacting, to make that living, breathing world, to do all the things they did in the previous games, but to focus them around the player. So the world is kind of in stasis in Skyrim. It does not advance, it does not move, it waits for the player to interact with it, because it's telling a basic story. Ultimately, I don't like that personally. I believe it's an amazing sandbox. I've enjoyed every minute that I've had playing Skyrim, however, there are many parts of the Skyrim story where I come to realize where the quest dialogue is directly contradicting other pieces of the quest dialogue in order to tell a story, but then to make the mechanics work. Ultimately, the game was not designed around the story. The story was bent around the game, and it shows. So the purpose of this series has been entirely, if you disregarded the mechanics of the game entirely in the development process, then what kind of story could you tell? And some people love it, some people hate it, but it's never going to happen. As someone was arguing earlier, Bethesda doesn't need a writer like myself, and it doesn't need a consultant to tell them that they're doing it wrong. What they need is a change in design direction, one that respects the lore, has the lore written for it to begin with. Furthermore, they need to stop thinking so small-mindedly. It seems like every single game is getting more and more narrow in terms of scope and scale, and that makes me sad, considering the amazing adventures you could have in Daggerfall if the systems were simply fixed. The systems are improving, the graphics are improving, but the storyline and the characters and all of it is suffering as a result. Either Bethesda needs to retune its design direction, or it needs a new game director. And I would say that a new game director would be the last resort, absolutely last resort, because I love the sandboxes they've created. I've spent nearly 3,000 hours in Skyrim, nearly 400 hours in Fallout 4. It just goes to show that their sandboxes are not bad. But ultimately, every single thing that is made by a human being can be improved upon. That's what this series is about. It's about explaining what could be better. Now, if you like this series, please give it a like. If you didn't like it, give a dislike. It's okay. But please, either way, leave a comment. Check the social media links for more content, and keep an eye out for my ideal Elder Scrolls 6 videos coming soon. This has been Zhakaron, and y'all have a good one.